Blessed day, everyone. This is Erna Florence Alpontanar from the Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, major in English, Batch 2. Today, I'm gonna discuss to you the introduction of Module 2, in which analyzing the significance of primary sources to the history of the Filipino people. So, this module is a collection of primary sources that significantly contributed to the shaping of Philippine history. It analyzes the significance of primary sources to the grand narrative of the history of the Filipino people by providing concrete facts and details coming from first-hand witnesses of the country's specific historic events. These primary sources are arranged in a way that they chronologically narrate past events. Each source is analyzed by its content and context. The historical significance of the text is likewise determined, and the purpose and objective of the author are also studied. In this module, there were 9 sections. So in section 1, Customs of Tagalog by Juan de Plasencia. In section 2, Raiders of the Sulu Sea, a documentary film. In section 3, Kartilya ng Katipunan by Emilio Jacinto. In section 4, The Works of Luna and Amorsolo. In section 5, Mga Gunita ng Himagsikan by Emilio Aguinaldo. In section 6, The Act of the Declaration of Philippine Independence by Ambrosio Rienzares Bautista. In section 7, Philippine Cartoons, Political Caricatures of the American Era. Section 8, Filipino Grievances against Governor Wood. And the last section, which is in section 9, Corazon C. Aquino's speech before the United States Congress on September 18, 1986. For further information of the different sections, it will be discussed by our next reporters.
Hi everyone! For this video, I'm going to report the Module 2, Section 1 in the Reading in Philippine History. So, this section, shows different practices and customs noted down by Fray Juan de Plasencia in his account, Customs of the Tagalog. The Tagalog had long been practicing this even prior to the arrival of the Spaniards. Such practice only proved that Filipino already lived with the political, economic, and cultural system prior to the Spanish colonials of the Philippines. So, who is Juan de Plasencia? Fray Juan de Plasencia, also known by his real name, Juan de Portacarrero, was one of the 7 children of Pedro Portacarrero, which is the father of Juan de Portacarrero. And then, he was born and raised in Extremadura, Spain in the 16th century during the country's golden age or Siglo de Oro. So, as a pair of the Franciscan order, de Plasencia performed missionaries and sacerdotal duties in numerous towns in Luzon. He was also created with foundation of many towns in Quezon, Laguna, Rizal, and Bulacan. Juan de Plasencia, his interaction with the Tagalog convert to Christianity was influenced him in writing the book Relation de las Costumbres de los Tagalos, which is Customs of the Tagalogs, in 1589. And then the book identifies that the political, social, economic, and cultural system that were already in place among Filipino communities prior to the arrival of the Spaniards. He was dedicated to lead a lifestyle devoid of luxury and to be in constant contact with the people he wanted to convert as Christianity. He wanted people easily understand the Catholic Church for them to willing accept the Catholic faith. After his work, sad to say that he died a year later in Lilio, Laguna in 1590, and he was honored by the Franciscan order with the title of Venerable. So he was a great prayer in But in the time of Juan de Plasencia, Filipinos were allowed to hold the position gobernadorcillo of Pueblos. Friars and also all friars assigned in the parishes perform administrative duties in the local level by supervising and monitoring the activities of gobernadorcillo. So, by the way, what is friar? What is friars? So, friars it is a priest in a Catholic church or in a Catholic church that who had higher power than the governor of Pueblos. So the friars became the most influential and knowledgeable figure in the Pueblo. So as what I said earlier, that the friars is higher than the gobernadorcillo in the time of Juan de Plasencia. Some duties of friars were to periodically inform from superiors of what's happening. So they encountered some problem to report the number of their converts, the people practice their economic situation. But where Juan de Plasencia, who write the Relation de las Costumbres de los Tagalogs, which is Customs of Tagalog 1589, the work of Plasencia is such an example of some friars, because his work contains extensive information reconstructing the political and social and socio-cultural history of the Tagalog region. So Plasencia's work is an primary sources because it is a first-hand account of his experience and observation of the gobernadorcillo in the Pueblo. So the work of Plasencia is considered by many historians as an example of prior accounts. So as what I said earlier, that his work is an example of some prayers. So the original text of Plasencia Customs of the Tagalog is currently kept in AGI. So what is AGI? Archivo General de Indias in Seville, Spain. So this is also duplicated copy in Archivo Franciscano Ibaro Oriental or EFIO in Madrid, Spain. So these are the Catholic Church who are most popular in Catholic Church. So in the Philippines, in English version appeared in the volume 7 of Blair and Robertson collection of Spain documents. So other English translation was published as part of the volume. So for free Hispanic Philippines of the Filipiniana Book Guide Series. There are also friars and colonial officials who wrote about the Philippines during the early Spanish colonial period, which is Miguel Lorca. So the arrival of Miguel de Lorca in the Philippines in 1576, he became an encomendero of Panay. So after 6 years, he wrote the Relaciones de las Islas Filipinas in 1582. So that described the way of life Filipinos living in Western Visayas area. And next is Antonio de Morga. So when Antonio de Morga arrived in the Philippines in 1595 as assessor and teniente general, and he wrote Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, which provide the valuable information about the Philippines at the latter parts of the 16th century. So many of Filipino knows about the Philippine history during the first century of the Spanish period, were derived from the accounts of the Spanish friars and colonial officials. So those Filipino, we will discuss it in section 2. So in this section is discussed about the work of Juan de Plasencia, about the people that converted to Christianity or the people who willing to accept the Catholic faith of his time. That's also, thank you for your listening in my report, and let's proceed into the next section, which is section 2. So thank you guys, and God bless.
Good morning, everyone. At this moment, I am going to report Section 2 in Module 2, which is entitled Raiders of the Sulu Sea Documentary Film. Raiders of the Sulu Sea is a documentary film about how the Spaniard defended the city of Zamboanga, Fort Pillar. The pillar was the last base of defense which was used to control our economy in the past. The Raiders of Sulu Sea are indigenous people from the south. It shows the Filipino struggle for freedom and explains the opposition. So, these are some examples of Islam culture. First, one God, or also known as Allah. Role of Imam or prayer leader. Prayer protocol and text. Drawing visual depiction of prophets. Dietary restriction. Celebration. Wearing the hijab. Politeness and respect for elders, and etc. So these are the Muslim culture or their culture practices. So let's proceed to Christian culture. First, believe in God. Of course, we do believe in God. Baptism. The death, descent into hell, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. Christ's second coming, the day of judgment, and salvation of the faithful. And last, love God. Raiders of the Sulu Sea is a historical documentary produced by Oak Tree Films, established in 1996. Oak Tree Films was founded by Zahirat Bano Kodili, the CEO, along with Lim Swat Yen, the COO, and Jason Lai, Director of Content. Throughout the 3.5 centuries of conflict between the Spanish and the population of the southern Philippines, maritime raiding played a key role not only for the accumulation of wealth and slaves, but also as a means of warfare and anti-colonial resistance. These are the examples of material culture of Moros.
First, sword. Sword is one of the material cultures of Moros. Sword is the most common weapon used in different kinds of wars. Second, armor is one of the material culture of Moros. Third, vessel. Fourth, cannon. Fifth, body armor. Sure, the significance of these weapons of war shows that the Moro population are into fighting, reading, violence, and protection.
The Raiders of Sulu Sea are indigenous people from the south, which have very good at waters and idealistic on how they live and preserve their culture from the colonized countries, as we saw the battle between the raiders and the Spaniards on Zamboanga, which is Spanish. Moro fought for religious rather than political reasons, and their actions were unconnected with those of the Filipino revolutionaries who conducted the Philippine-American War in 1899 to 1902. These talk about the slave raiding of these tribes as they fought against the colonizer. So, and that will be all. Thank you.
Section 3, Kartilya ng Katipunan by Emilio Jacinto. So this section sheds light on Emilio Jacinto's Kartilya ng Katipunan, which enumerates the guidelines that new members of Katipunan have to follow. So it contains 13 teachings that members were required to adhere to. So now we're going to talk about the background of the author, which is Emilio Jacinto. So historians regard Emilio Jacinto as the brains of Katipunan. Artemio Ricarte called him the Moses of the Filipino people, while Epifanio de los Santos considered him as the soul of revelation and the eye of Katipunan. He was born in Truso, Manila on December 15, 1875. His father was Mariano Jacinto, who according to Zaidi was a bookkeeper but according to E. de los Santos was a merchant. His mother, Josefa Dizon, was a manghihilot or midwife. On his educational background, he studied at the private school of Maestro Ferrer and later the private school of Jose Dizon. He was enrolled by his uncle at the Colegio de San Juan de Litran for his bachelor's degree and he later transferred to the University Santo Tomas to study law. He used the pen names Paningkian, Damislao, and Kailyong. He joined the Katipunan in 1894 and was the youngest member at 19 years old. He was the fiscal secretary, editor, and later general of the Katipunan. He also became the director of the printing shop and library of the Katipunan. The library contained written works and on tactics and weapons, the French Revolutions, and works of the demagogos. Jacinto was proclaimed generalissimo of the North or punong hukbo ng hilagaan, became the advisor of the Supremo and punished Bonifacio with weapons, money, printing materials, and music compositions. He was also the editor of newspaper Kalayaan. He died on malaria on April. He died of malaria on April 16, 1899 at 23 years old.
That should be all for the backgrounds of the authors. Now we're going to talk about the historical background of Cartilla. So, historical background of the Cartilla. Andres Bonifacio long wanted to have a codified documents listing the duties and responsibilities of every members of Katipunan. Incidentally, as Bonifacio was drafting said document, Emilio Jacinto was writing one as well. By the time Bonifacio was about to consult Jacinto for comments on his draft, the latter presented his work to the Supremo. After seeing that draft of Cartilla ng Katipunan by Emilio Jacinto, Bonifacio was impressed with Jacinto's style of writing and decided to adopt the Cartilla as guidebook for the rules and regulations of the Katipunan. So aside from the maltreatment experienced by Filipinos from the Spaniard, the following are the other factors were influential in the forming of the Katipunan and that of the Cartilla.
Siti Aisa Jalali, and I am here to tackle about section 4, the works of Luna and Amorsolo. Juan Luna and Fernando Amorsolo are two important artists in the history of visual arts in the Philippines. Their artworks illustrate important points in the Philippine history. Juan Luna was born on October 23, 1857 in Badoc, Ilocos Norte. He was third among the 7 children of Joaquin Luna de San Pedro y Posados Posadas. From Zambales and Laureana, Novesio Y. Achenta from La Union. He was granted the title Licentiate. He was granted the title Licentiate Pilot of High Seas after passing the government examination for sailors. He was also a member of the Hong Kong Revolutionary Committee, Hong Kong Junta, that tried to convince Emilio Aguinaldo during his exile in Hong Kong to return to the Philippines and take part in the armed rebellion against the Spaniards. And the historical background of Luna's paintings. Many of Luna's paintings illustrate literary and historical scenes that carry political commentaries. The most important work of Luna is this Bolearium, the largest painting in the Philippines. It won 3 gold medals in the 1884 Exposition Nacional de Bellas Artes in Madrid. And the next of his
So for now, let's proceed to section 5 entitled Mga Gunita ng Himagsikan. So if you have a book with you, kindly open it on 108 to the background of the author. So here are the background of the author. So let us read it. Emilio Sammy Aguinaldo Sr. was born on March 22, 1869 in Kawit, Cavite. His parents are Carlos Hamir Aguinaldo and Trinidad Aguinaldo. And then in his high school years, he studied at Colegio de San Juan de Letran, but then in his 4th year, he stopped because of his father's death. In the year 1895, at the age of 25, he became Kawit's Gobernador Salas Capitan Municipal, so he is much fortunate because on his younger year, his father also was appointed to become a Gobernador Salas. So Aguinaldo would later become the first and youngest president in the Republic of the Philippines. He was once the president of our country, the very youngest president in Philippines. So after his success, after everything, he was died because of coronary thrombosis. Because of that disease, he was died. Then on that year, it was February 6, 1964, and he was 96 years old at that time. So here are some backgrounds of him. So let's talk about historical background of Mga Gunita ng Himagsikan. So, Aguinaldo produced the first volume of his memoir between 1928 and 1946. So, in his memoirs, his birth, his childhood years, his diary, documents preserved, family lore he personally gathered from his relatives was included in his memoirs. So in that way, we could easily illustrate that Aguinaldo is a family lover and story keeper. Then Aguinaldo memoirs were after the deliberation of his memoirs, it was translated by Los Colendrino Buco, the Secretary of the Graduate School of Education and faculty member of the University of the East. So, if you are interested by what we've discussed this moment, just search it easily at the Google. Just search it easily at the Google and you can find everything there in an easy way. So thank you so much for listening and hoping that you have understood everything what I've discussed. So it's all about Emilio Aguinaldo and thank you so much. So proceed to the next report. Okay?
Now let's proceed to the next section, the section 6. This section is the act of the declaration of Philippine independence and national resilience. Notice that. This section focuses on the acts of declaration of Philippine independence, authored by Anibosio Rizal's notice, and also mention different important aspects in actual declaration. the author. Ambrosio Rosales Bautista, also known as Don Bosio, was born on December 17, 1830 in Binyan, Laguna, to Gregorio Enriquez Bautista and Silvestra Alcantara. He studied law at the University of Santo Tomas and earned his degree in 1865 at 35 years old. He was arrested and imprisoned at Fort Santiago by the Spaniards as he was suspected of being involved in the Philippine Revolution that managed to defend himself and was eventually released. He solicited funds to finance the campaign for reforms in the Philippines and became a member of the La Liga Filipina, Cuerpo de Comisarios and La Propaganda. He became the first advisor of President Emilio Aguinaldo in 1898, and contrary to popular belief, it was Bautista and not Aguinaldo who played the Philippine flag before the jubilant crowd during the proclamation of Philippine independence in Cavite. On July 14, 1899, he was elected as President of the Philippine in the Revolutionary Congress in Tarlac and was later appointed Judge of the Court of First Instance of Pangasinan. Historical background of the Philippines. In April 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out as a result of U.S. intervention in the Cuban War of Independence. In May 1898, the Battle of Manila Bay issued Emilio Aguinaldo decided to return to the Philippines from Hong Kong, bringing with him the first Philippine flag, sung by Marcela Agoncillo and Rosenda Agoncillo and Delfina Herbosa. Upon arriving in Manila, Aguinaldo received the Christmas in going Cavite to rally all Filipinos to unite and fight against the Spaniards. The historical battle cry of the Hour of Liberation. The Act of Declaration of Philippine Independence, or Acta de la Proclamation de la Independencia del Pueblo Filipino, written by Bautista, had the intention to encourage Filipinos to fight against the Spaniards. Aguinaldo formally declared Philippine independence in Cavite on June 12, 1989. It was symbolically accompanied by the playing of the Philippine National Anthem, composed by Julian Felipe with lyrics by Jose Palma from his poem Filipinas. At the same time, Ambrosio Bautista read the Act of Declaration of Philippine Independence in Spanish, the United States of America. However, never recognized this declaration. The Acta de la Proclamation de la Independencia del Pueblo Filipino was among the documents lost during the height of the pilferage of historical documents in 1990s. The essential anniversary of Philippine independence heightened the demand for such documents in black market. The document was finally returned to the National Library in 1994 after a professor from the University of the Philippines, Milagros Guerrero, negotiated for its return. That's all for the section 6.
I am Joanne Bintong Bases, and now I am going to report the section 7 entitled Philippine Cartoons Political Caricature of the American Era. During the American era, the political caricature gained popularity as a form of expressions. And for now, I am going to discuss the two authors who are mentioned during this era. I am going to discuss about their background regarding their real life, who really they are in their real life. So first, I am going to start with Alfred McCoy. Alfred was born on June 8, 1945 in Massachusetts, USA. He earned his BE in European Studies from Columbia College in 1968. He finished his MA in Asian Studies at the University in California in Berkeley in 1969 and his PhD in Southeast Asian History at Yale University in 1977. Alfred studied Philippine political caricatures to understand the social and political context of the Philippines during the American period and later with Alfredo Roses. So, even though Alfred McCoy did not create any political caricature, but his interests are still there. Still argue him to do something caricature to produce a single collections. So now I am going to proceed Alfredo Reyes Rosas. Alfredo was born on April 29, 1923. He was a painter, an essayist, and a versatile artist who is considered to be a prominent figure in the Philippine art. That was Alfredo Reyes. His painting started with a figurative style but soon began to amalgamate Expressionism, Cubism, and Impressionism. So, Alfredo is a painter. He is also an essayist and a versatile artist in the Philippines arts. So, those are the two authors who are mentioned during this era. And now, I am going to proceed with several newspapers in the Manila, including the Philippines Free Press, Lipag Kalabaw, The Independent, and the Bagong Puso. So, the Philippine Free Press was founded in 1906 by Judge W.A. Kincaid and was taken by McCulloch Vic due to bankruptcy. So, the Philippine Free Press was founded in 1906, and eventually it was taken by McCulloch because due to the reason of bankruptcy. So, the second one is Lipag Kalabaw. Lipag Kalabaw was launched in the same year as Philippine Free Press. So, they are the same launch during the Philippines Free Press founded in 1906, the same as the Lipag Kalabaw. It was also launched in a year 1906. It was published in Tagalog and Spanish, containing satiric cartoons. So, it was published in Tagalog and Spanish. And the third one is The Independent. The Independent was founded in 1915 by the father of Cebuano letters, Vicente Soto, one of the militant and aggressive advocates of immediate independence. So, The Independent was a weekly newspaper published by English and Spanish and served as a forum and discussions regarding the political issues. So now I'm going to proceed with Bagong Puso, which is the last one. Bagong Puso, it was a popular newspaper in Cebu, which literally means new force. It was known for highlighting the conditions in Cebu prior to the war. And that's all for section 7.
Hi everyone, this is Robin Margilantes, Bachelor in Secondary Education, major in English, Batch 2. And for today's video, I'm going to report about section 8. It's all about Filipino grievances against Governor Wood. Let's proceed of the background of the author. Gregorio Z, born on May 25, 1907 in Pasanjan, Laguna, is one of the most famous Filipino historian of all time. His works serve as basis of many Filipino history textbooks. Z has made significant contribution to the Philippine history. A hardworking scholar, he authored 67 books, some of these which become textbook in history for high schools and colleges in the country. He has also written more than 500 articles in the history published in local foreign periodicals. And this was the picture of Gregorio Z. He was also active in Philippine politics. He served as mayor of Pasanjan, Laguna from 1971 to 1975. And the next part was historical background of the document. General Leonard Wood first arrived in the Philippines in 1903 after rendering his services in Cuba. He was appointed as governor of Moro Province which comprised the southern islands and Mindanao. At the same time, General Wood was also charged of 5 districts and was commanding general of the American troops in Mindanao and Sulu. In 1921, U.S. President Warren Harding commissioned the Wood Forvest mission headed by former Governor General Cameron Forvest and General Wood. The mission aim was to assess if the Philippines could already be declared an independent nation, following the Philippinization policy implemented by the administration of Francis Burton Harrison. This policy allowed Filipinos to be actively involved in running the government as part of the American policy of benevolent assimilation. However, Wood was responsible for reversing the Philippinization policy implemented by Burton. He issued Executive Order Number 37, which nullified laws creating the Board of Control and the assumed function of the body. Such attempt generated tension between Filipino administrators and the Governor-General, which was further aggravated by the cabinet crisis of 1923 stemming from the Ray Conley case, a Secret Service detective accused of accepting bravery and having mistresses. The case was brought forward and was given the final decision of suspended by Jose Villarreal as the Secretary of the Interior. However, this was disregarded by Governor Wood, which prompted the Filipino leaders to protest against his actions and regulations to this defiance of Philippine Authority Act or the Jones Law that provided Filipinos legislative power. And it was followed by the resignation of Senate President Manuel L. Quezon and House Speaker Manuel Ruas as members of the Council of the States. This resignation caused the cabinet crisis of 1923. The growing executive-legislative tension became more personal as the governor blatantly exercised his veto power in the most of the legislation passed by the Philippine legislature. Such development led to the drafting of Filipino grievances against Governor Wood, which was approved by the Commission on Independence on November 17, 1926. And that was the last part of my report.
Good day everyone, I am Mary Ann C. Asonda, Bachelor of Secondary Education Level 1, Batch 2. To continue our report, in Section 9, Corazon C. Aquino's speech before the United States Congress on September 18, 1986. President Corazon C. Aquino was invited to deliver a speech before the United States Congress on September 18, 1986. In recognition of the peaceful EDSA revolution, which ousted Marcos and paved the way for Aquino to become the president. So, these are the background of the author. Maria Corazon Puri Sumolong Cuenco Aquino, in January 25, 1933, August 1, 2009, became President of the Philippines because of the 1986 EDSA Revolution, the non-violent revolution that ousted President Ferdinand Marcos. So, we always remember that in 1986 EDSA Revolution, Sumolong Cuenco Aquino, she is the president that time. She was the wife of the assassinated opposition figurehead during the martial law era, Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. She served as the 11th President of the Philippines and named by Time Magazine as Woman of the Year. So, as if we will imagine, that time, she is very prominent. She has a title that year, which is Woman
of the Year in 1986. In 1999, she was chosen by Time magazine as one of the 20 most influential Asians of the 20th century. So, that time, she was very potential woman that year. Prior to become the president, she had not held any elective office. She died on August 1, 2009 due to colorectal cancer. So, that moment, maybe most of the people, it is very unexpected moment, I guess, when she died because she has a disease which is colorectal cancer, and that is the reason why she died. Historical background of the document. It has been the practice of the U.S. Congress to convene a joint meeting for the purpose of hearing an address from important figure, usually a visiting foreign leader. Corazon C. Aquino delivered her historic speech before the United States Congress on September 18, 1986. Barely 7 months after being sworn into office under a revolutionary government brought about by the EDSA Revolution. During that time, Cory's presidency was unstable, for she inherited an economy that was in shambles. There was massive poverty and unemployment in the country. From the word massive, it was very strong poverty or circumstances happens in that country that time. The loyalty of the military to her administration was still in question. Her administration was already besieged by a coup attempt backed by a multitude of civilian Marcos loyalists after 5 months of assumption of office. Despite releasing political detainees, the communist insurgency was still gripping the countryside. She needed foreign allies to recognize her newly established administration. The aforementioned historic speech targeted 2 goals at the same time. So, that speech has 2 goals. So, what kind of goals? So, this is one. It aimed to express gratitude towards the United States of helping the Filipinos regain their freedom and to seek more help from them in restoring the government, considering Aquino's decision to honor the foreign debts the Philippines incurred during the Marcos administration. In this report, the important things you must always remember during the Aquino's speech, she said, "I have returned as the president of a free people. The last had fallen on my shoulders to continue offering the democratic alternative to our people." She said, "Today I say, join as America as we build a new home for democracy, another heaven for the oppressed, so it may stand as a shining testament of our 2 nations' commitment to freedom." So, as we go on, the very necessary things happened during the Corazon Aquino's speech in September 18, 1986. We might asking, what is the purpose or what is the main objective of her speech? So, the answer of that, the main objective of her speech during that time, it was because of the love of our country. That speech, she make it because of the love of our country.
Good day. This is Major P. Del Coro, DS Ed student, major in English, Batch 2. So, to continue our report, I am going to discuss the conclusions of our topic. To gain further knowledge on a specific topic to be used at the conduction of historical research, it is a must to take consider of the different sources of information to be used. These are primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources is originally written by a person who personally experienced the said event, while secondary sources is only an interpretation of the primary sources. It was said that primary sources had significantly contributed in shaping the Philippine history as they provide factual details and information about the historic or past events. One of the documents to serve as the primary source is the Customs of Tagalog by Juan de Plasencia. It gives information about the political and socio-cultural history of the Tagalog region. The Kartilya ng Katipunan, written by Emilio Jacinto, is also being used as a primary source. It contains 13 teachings that has to be followed by all the members of the Katipunan. The artworks of Juan Luna and Fernando Amorsolo was also being used as basis in gaining information. They are also considered as primary source. Specifically, the paintings made by Juan Luna, named as Spolarium, and the other one is The Battle of Lepanto, and also Fernando Amorsolo's masterpiece, which is called The Rape of Manila. The great documentary film, which was produced by the Oak Tree Film, was also considered as a primary source. It depicts how the raiders went along with the trades in Zamboanga and how they retaliate against the Spaniards colonizers. The memoir, Mga Gunita ng Himagsikan, written by Emilio Jacinto, is also a primary source. It narrates the significant events in his life from 1928 to 1946. The Act of the Declaration of the Philippine Independence, written by Ambrosio Bautista, is also considered as the basis of getting information. It mentions the different important aspects of the actual declaration, such as the national anthem and the waving of the national flag. Philippine cartoons or political cartoons are also a great help in seeking information. It illustrates the changing mores and times of the American rule. Other than that, the document of Gregorio Zaide that focuses on the grievances of the Filipinos against the governance of Governor Wood was also being used. In addition to that idea, the historic speech of President Corazon Aquino was also used in gaining information in conducting historical research. It is important to know if the series of information you are using give of facts and significant details. Historical research must undergo a thorough review while using the primary and secondary sources. However, no matter what is the topic you are going to tackle in your research must contain facts and nothing but actual facts. So that will be the end of our discussion. Thank you for listening.